Murdoch University is the provider of resources and transmission facilities for the 6 Points podcast. The views expressed on the show are those of the individual and not necessarily those of Murdoch University or Radio Murdoch. All views expressed are those of the individual unless otherwise stated.
There's a spillage across half-back. Port Adelaide pick the ball up. Matt White now running down the wing of Etihad Stadium. He takes a bounce. Takes a second bounce. Richmond might catch him here. He's burnt off his opponent. Matt White takes a third bounce. Runs inside the 50 from 49 metres out. He unloads. Open goal square. Goal!
Ebert pumps it into the forward 50. Wingard. Oh, Wingard! Oh, baby. There's your mark of the year. Get around him, boys. Oh, he's played on. Oh, he's kicked it anyway. Wingard, what a star.
Good Tuesday, footy fans. Welcome to the 6 Points podcast for another week. My name is Robert Beaver, and across the desk, a man who was described by one of our university tutors last week as being, and I quote, quite brilliant. My co-host, Sean Subra.
Yeah, it's not the first time, Rob. I'm getting a bit used to it now. It's getting a bit old.
Just a little bit of a humble brag to start the show off there,
Yeah.
Sean. Lovely, absolutely.
No, going well, Rob. Let's get right into the footy. Very excited. Round one is so close.
But before we do, what did you say to warrant such a response from a prestigious academic at our institution?
To be honest, I don't actually know. I just answered one of her questions, and then, unlike everyone else, she just said, "You're quite brilliant." And I said, well, thank you.
You're not going to argue with that, are you,
Yeah.
Sean? Absolutely. All right, so before we get right into the week of AFL, a little bit of shameless promotion to be done. So if you want to be involved in the show, there are so many ways you can do it, Sean. So many ways. Number one, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/the 6 points, and that is with a number. Number two, you can tweet us on the Twitter machine at 6 Points Podcast, again, with a number. Or three, you can email us at 6pointspodcast@gmail.com. That is with the word 6 spelled out SIX, because as we mentioned on last week's show, somebody, and I don't know who, has already registered the domain with the number.
What are they doing, Rob?
I know. I think I might have to email them and actually
do it.
have something. There's something, it's our brand.
Hassle them.
We've got to take
until
control
they give
of
it
it.
up.
No, we wouldn't hassle them at all. Right. So if you like the show, hit us up with a review on the iTunes store. Just search for 6 Points, again with a number, and everything will come up from there. So, Sean, on today's show, we get a little bit closer to round one. Of course, it launches
very close
in less than 48 hours, of course, on Monday
Wow.
night at the MCG. So what we are going to do is go through every single team. We have at least one question. Some of them we have two. Some clubs have had busier off seasons or a little bit more controversy surrounding them.
Yeah, a lot of controversy.
So we will go through every single team, and we'll
Let's do it.
We'll sort of nail it, and we'll say our.
Are we going
opinions,
alphabetical, Rob?
We are going alphabetical, which means that we'll
Which
start
means
with
what? With the mighty team from South Australia, the Adelaide Crows.
I don't think that's the mighty team from South Australia.
It's in their song. Have you not heard the song, Rob? The
when was the last time the Crows won, Sean?
Oh, well.
I haven't heard it in a long time.
Blight was in in power back then. We will start with Adelaide, though, and they finished 10th last year in 2014. So the upside for the Crows, I guess, would be the new coach, Phil Walsh. It'll be interesting to see how he can change a club. Will it be the next Ken Hinkley over in the south of Australia? Rob, what do you think?
I don't think. I think anyone hiring a coach wants them to be Ken Hinkley, but I don't think you can sort of plan on that happening. Ken Hinkley was obviously someone that came in and completely revolutionised that club in the way that it.
Don't ruin it, because we are going to get to Port Adelaide soon when we get to P. Obviously, the big thing for the Crows this year will be the Patrick Dangerfield leaving sort of, not controversy, saga, I should say. The contract issue. The thing which I don't want, and which a lot of supporters don't want, is that to be hanging over the club the whole year, and everyone kind of more interested in if Patrick's going to go or leave than sort of what's happening on the field. I would like to see an answer pretty soon. Obviously, it's not going to happen. But, if he stays, then it might happen. But if he's leaving, obviously, we won't get an answer sort of that soon. But I just, I don't want it to ruin their season. They obviously haven't had the best last couple of years, and I just hate for it to be the big thing that kind of puts the axe in their season early.
What's your gut feeling as a Crows supporter and someone who watches them and sort of goes around with them? What's your feeling? Is Danger going to stay? Is he going to go?
I think, like all other Crows supporters, when Tex was made captain, I think the Dangerfield boat had officially sailed. I believe that was the start of the end for Danger at the Crows. But I mean, you never know. Like players, obviously from Geelong, but players all the time go and fall in love. Travis Spoke obviously is a good example. From Geelong, went to Adelaide and fell in love with the club. So you never know.
Port's also winning. I think that's an important.
Yeah, that is true. I think when Crows are at their worst, it's kind of to be sort of seen as based around Dangerfield, which I don't think Dangerfield wants. I think he wants to be in a winning side where he can just excel and sort of do really well. So I mean, we'll wait and see. But
I think also Dangerfield. The rumours are that if he goes anywhere, he'll go to Geelong.
Yeah.
Patch of Dangerfield, Joel Selwood.
Yeah,
I don't want to break your heart, but that seems like a pretty good combination in the midfield there. Any last thoughts on Adelaide, Sean? Obviously, you know them a lot better than I do. So
yeah, I think if they can kind of put the Dangerfield thing out of their mind, I think they'll have a good fresh year with the new coach. The issue for Adelaide in the past, from not like recent past, in the past with other coaches, is that they've done quite well, but they haven't had the result with Gary Ayres and with Neil Craig. They were doing actually quite well. They were always finishing kind of top 8, maybe sometimes top 4, but no premiership, and it was just kind of getting a bad attitude, and that's where they've kind of ended up now. So they can put the Dangerfield thing out, and with the new coach, hopefully they can get up there. But let's move on to the Brisbane Lions. Now, Brisbane finished 15th last year. Not the greatest year for them, but they would seemingly being the talk of the town, talk of Australia, really, as being the one club to sort of come up. And
well, they had that much cap space. I think they've made pretty good use of it. I mean, obviously Dane Beams is the big one. Of course, moving over from Collingwood for personal issues primarily and family issues. But he's absolutely. I mentioned on last week's show. I think at some point he's in line to win a Brownlee. He'll be up there 2 or 3 years in a row. At his best, he's a dominant player. So Brisbane, obviously, it doesn't matter who you give up in that situation. You're getting the better of the deal. If you get the best player in any deal, whether it's free agency or a trade or whatever, you're getting the best of the deal. And I think that's what Brisbane did.
It was a great pickup, wasn't it? I mean, if you look at him last year, he was excelling in a team that has Dane Swan and Scott Pendlebury, and he was still coming out on top of them.
Exactly.
Such a good player, such a good pickup for Brisbane.
The only downside is that without players of the calibre of a Pendlebury and a Swan, will he be the one to get tagged? But having said that, Rockcliffe, Zorka, there's a lot of talent. I think the only part of the Lions roster that did really excel last year was their midfield. So, I mean, they've added another really, really strong pillar there, especially going forward. He's still quite young. For the next 5 years, they could have an elite midfield in this league.
Yep. Daniel Rich is back from a knee complaint as well, so that's a big in for them. Also, hopefully, he's a great player, Daniel Rich. Hopefully, he can get up there as well. They've got a potent midfield, obviously, as you were saying. Where do we think the goals are going to come from with JB out?
I think this is the Big John O'Brien. First of all, what a loss for the game in general. What a character.
Thank goodness that he's on TV now, because I don't think I could live without JB in my life.
Need a bit of John O'Brien in your life. Where do the goals come from? And the answer is the midfield. Until they can find a bona fide sort of forward setup, at least, or a forward star, that midfield's going to have to carry them. And I think that's what's going to stop them from being elite for the next couple of years, or even sort of that sort of 8 to 6 range. I don't think they'll make the finals this year. 2 or 3 years from now, if they draft well, or if they can, sort of reassert their assets and trade them off and things like that, they could have hopefully a really potent forward line. I mean, it was probably only 5 or 6 years ago they had Jonathan Brown, Brendan Favola in there, and we all know how that worked out. But the point being that things can turn around so quickly, and if Brisbane can get a forward, or at least somebody that they can kick a ball to long and have the crummers around it, their fortunes could turn around very quickly.
Well, they've got last year was really Josh Green was he kicked the most goals, I think, for Brisbane, and Lewis Taylor also. So I mean, not sort of household names yet, maybe, but yeah, with that midfield, you'd hope that they can just pump it long and they can just sort of get the easy crummer out the back. But we'll wait and see. Let's move on to Carlton now, and Carlton last year they finished 13th. Pretty disappointing year. They hadn't won a game. I think they lost the first four or 5 games last year, so not a great start. They did obviously do okay to finish 13th. They didn't get this. They avoided the spoon. lot of injuries last year.
And a lot of controversy off the field as well. Obviously, Mitch Robinson's issues were well documented, and obviously he's no longer at the club. Jeffy Gartlett's also moved on as well. So I think the biggest question looking for Carlton this year is, are Mitch Robinson and Jeff Gartlett an addition by subtraction case for them? Is Carlton actually better not having these players who are obviously skilled? I mean, obviously they wouldn't have been picked up by other clubs if those clubs didn't think that there was something they could bring to their club that they were missing. So they'll obviously bring something to a team, but have they gotten better by releasing those players?
I think so. I think that both Mitch and Jeff brought a kind of social morale which isn't really what you would want at a club. Personally, I wouldn't, if they bring that kind of negativity in the club, and kind of they're bringing kind of controversy to the club, which really isn't needed. And when you're having such a lousy year, that's the last thing that you want, is for the spotlight to be on you when you've sort of been playing so bad on the field. And
especially when obviously Mick Malthouse came over, and Carlton thought they were on the verge of something, and Mick pretty quickly and assuredly told them, look, we're nowhere near it. I'm going to tear this to shreds and start it from scratch. When you're in a situation like that, the supporters are let down. There's intense media scrutiny already. You don't want to give anyone more of a reason to hang around your club as a person of the media. We love it because we get something to talk about, but as a club, that's not what you want.
Mick Malthouse, obviously we were discussing before the show, Mick Malthouse came out and he's sort of had a press conference, his whole confident air to Carlton and how well they're going to do this year. Can we see it happening? I personally don't think so.
Me and you ran through our ladders before the show, and we'll get to them at the end of today's show, but no. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors there. I mean, I'm happy to be proven wrong, and for Mick's sake and for Carlton's sake, I hope I am. I mean, at the end of the day, as supporters, all we want is the best teams going out. And if Carlton happens to be one of them, absolutely, I'd love it. But I don't think so.
Can't see it happening. Okay, they're rivals in Collingwood now. Now, Collingwood last year finished 11th. It was their worst season in 10 years. So big pressure now comes on Nathan Buckley. Obviously took over from Mick Malthouse, who's now at Carlton. They had a run of soft tissue injuries last year, which could have probably did sort of go towards that lousy season last year. But what happens this year? Can they get over these injuries? Can they kind of get back to the winning culture that they were at?
First of all, the most important thing to mention is we obviously know that they've got a few issues going on off the field at the moment.
Yes, definitely.
We don't touch too much on that. I mean, the betting thing is one thing, but in terms of the drugs, there is no place in our game for it. But it is important to remember for everyone out there that this is the A samples that have come back for those two players. We cannot judge until the B samples come back.
So it's just like somebody getting alleged of a crime. It's not actually
essentially, It's very important to keep that in perspective. And whether or not you agree with the AFL's drug policy and ASADA and the way that they go about it, this is the way it is. You cannot say anything and reserve your judgment until those B samples have come back, either positive or negative, and then make your judgment from there. But in terms of Collingwood, will they get better this year? I don't think so. It'll be an interesting year. I mean, there's a lot of players, a lot of talent there at the top. Obviously, we mentioned Pendlebury and Swan.
Yeah.
Cloak's,
side bottom as well.
Side bottom. Cloak's obviously still there. There's a lot of talent coming up through those ranks. But I think the younger players are probably 2 or 3 years away from really excelling, from really taking Collingwood to where they want to go. Also, Dane Swan didn't have a great year last year. He might bounce back, but I think they'll need more help than what they get this year. It's
going to be a story of which players can get back to their best from a couple of years ago. Like your Dane Swans, your Travis Cloakes. If Ben Reid can stay fit for the whole year.
And even if Jesse White can actually do something in the forward line. I mean, he was obviously very hyped when he came to Collingwood, and he hasn't necessarily delivered to this point. Maybe another year under Nathan Buckley is what he needs. Maybe there's a big culture change with Buckley coming in there after Mick left. There's so much been talked about the Brat Pack and all those types of things. They've all been separated. Nathan's trying to usher in a new wave of talent, I guess, and it's about whether or not they can gel with the older style of players. But I don't think Collingwood will make the finals this year. I can't see them sort of making that push even for that 6 through 8 spot. I think it'll be another disappointing
So if they
season.
don't make the finals this year, what does that mean for Buckley? Is that it?
I think Buckley gets a little bit of a wave. I think he made it pretty clear when he started that he wanted to run things differently to Mick, and I don't think he's had enough time to implement that yet. if they go as far down as the wooden spoon, I think you'd have to start seriously looking at list management and sort of analysing Nathan's plan and where he wants to go. But at the same time, I think you give him another couple of years, especially as a club legend. He hasn't had the chance. Yeah. And usually after you win premierships, there is a 5 or 6 year sort of down rebuilding period, and Buckley's in the middle of that. So I think you need to give him more time.
Yep, Essendon. Now moving on. Essendon finished 7th last year. A lot of stuff around Essendon. Some breaking news you have for us, Rob. We'll just lightly touch on it. As we'd mentioned before, we don't like to dive right into it. But Rob, give us a little bit of breaking news.
So for those of you who don't know, all 34 players have been cleared and they've been found not guilty. Now, this brings to end one of the, in my mind, one of the most ridiculously overdrawn and it's a saga, honestly. I could have watched the entire Star Wars saga about 1,600 times, and that would have been more entertaining than what's going on in the last 2 years for Essendon. And I'm not a huge Star Wars fan, but it's good. Now they have a resolution. So let's move on from it and let's see. So I think this will help Essendon. Obviously, times in the last 2 years, you've seen that it's affected them on and off the field. They've had some inspirational wins because of it, and they've also just run out of energy towards the end of the season from it. So now that the pressure's not on Sean, do they make the 8 again this year, and how far can they go?
I don't think they can make the 8 again. James Hird is now back in charge, which is good news for them. There's not that kind of, we don't really know who the big leader is. You don't have sort of Mark Thompson coming in and sort of just taking the realm from 1 week, and there's kind of that decisiveness now that, yes, it's James Hird we're following. So I think that they are going to improve. Adam Cooney coming across from Essendon is going to be a big one for them. Big plus side for them. He will join Chapman and Goddard in that kind of almost retired, but I'm going to do another couple of years category of the Bombers, and they said to be playing good. So hopefully Cooney can kind of join that club. A question out for you, Rob. Has Jobe Watson played his best footy?
Has Jobe Watson? No.
No.
He is the heart and soul of the Essendon Football Club, especially during the time when Hird was obviously stood down for his involvement in this entire scandal as well. Jobe Watson, I don't necessarily agree with what Essendon's done, and again, we won't dive too much into that. But Jobe Watson is just a god among men. What he's able to do and put this club on his shoulders is amazing, and to do it under such a difficult circumstance for such a prolonged period of time. Is a testament to him as a person. Has he played his best footy? I think he's probably in his prime. So I think he'll have another year of really sort of elite level football. Eventually it'll start passing him by. But as of right now, I think he's capable of producing another stellar season.
I want to talk about Heppell now. Now, obviously, we've seen great things out of Heppell. Is he as good as he's being advertised to be? There's obviously a lot of kind of light on him that players at this caliber sometimes probably wouldn't get. But he's obviously the standout, and is that pressure going to kind of get to him, or can he still be playing good footy?
I think he's an excellent player. There's no doubt about that. I think his haircut definitely helps him stand out. And it sounds ridiculous, but this is the truth. People with defining visual characteristics, whether it be their hairstyle or an arm sleeve of tattoos or a man bun, as we discussed last week, they get the attention of people like me and you who analyse and who watch the AFL for no apparent reason, apparently. Is he as good as advertised? I think he can be. It ultimately depends on how hard he's willing to work. A lot of people sort of describing him as the next Pendlebury, which isn't a bad comparison. I mean, Pendlebury was obviously a fantastic player and still is, and he really leads Collingwood. But if Heppell can take that step, I mean, they'll have two of, in my mind, of the top 20 players in the league in Jobe Watson and Dyson Heppell. And I mean, you tip them not to make the finals. I think I have them out of the finals as well. But if you've got two of the top 20 players in the league, it's not going to be long, and you're not going to be far away from it. So if he can, absolutely. And again, the further we get away from this saga, hopefully the more the club can get back into a routine and operate on a day-to-day basis, and the players can concentrate on what's important, which is performing their best within the regulations of the game.
Without a doubt. Bit of a serious question to finish off with, does the Heppell mop go up into the man bun?
No. I hope not. I truly hope not. He seems like he's been playing with it long enough to avoid putting it up in a man bun.
He's
Dyson, if you're listening, don't do it. And Aaron, if you're listening as well, his brother, don't do it.
Paddy Ryder obviously left Essendon to go to Port Adelaide. Is this a big hole for the Bombers, or they can overcome this?
I think it's a big hole anyway. Any time you lose someone
they really
riders,
fought to keep him, didn't they?
Absolutely.
So when someone does that, you know that there's going to be a massive hole in the club.
And I think when Essendon turned around and said we won't take less than Ollie Wines, I mean, that showed how much they think of Ryder and how important he is. But, I mean, all clubs compensate and they do their best to patch it up. We'll see how they go. But like I said, if they've got Watson and Heppell in the midfield, and if Heppell is as good as advertised, then that can recover from a lot of flaws in your ruck division. So
Good. Moving over to Fremantle now, who finished 4th in 2014. Freo's, obviously, they made the grand final 2 years ago, but since then, they've kind of been, for a while now, they've kind of been that club who has always been up there, but never really been to the big show. So with Lachie Neale and players like Lachie Neale, Tom Sheridan in the middle of the ground, will their impact free up Nat Fyfe and get Nat sort of a bit closer to goal in that kind of half-forward spot?
I hope not. Lachie Neale obviously came out in the finals last year for me. He really stood up, especially against that game against Port Adelaide. Yeah. He was probably the best on ground along with Fyfe. But Fyfe, I think, is only 23 or 24. If he needs as opposed to going off, if he goes into the forward line, yeah, absolutely, I'm happy for it. If you're going to put Lachie Neale in the midfield ahead of Nat Fyfe, that's a problem. So in that respect, I hope not. But if he's going to do a Gary Ablett and just start resting in the forward line, absolutely. Fyfe's an extremely athletic player, reads the ball really, really well, just known for soaring in on weird angles and taking pack marks. So absolutely. And if that's going to happen, then that takes a bit of pressure off Matthew Pavlich.
Okay, so they're obviously last year they're straight sets exit in the finals last year. What does that do for the club this year? How do they approach that issue?
I think that the finals are a very finicky and fickle sort of procedure. A lot of other major sports in the world, whether it's such as the NBA, will go a best of 7, and you'd like to think over the course of 7 games, the best team will emerge. The AFL is completely different. It's a one-off. It's whoever's better on the day. I think the perfect example of this was the grand final between St Kilda and Collingwood. I think it was in 2010, where they had the replay the week after. Yeah. They drew on the first week, and then the second one, Collingwood smashed them. Yeah. And I think this is a prime example of just how weird the finals are. In that one day you can have a team that's better all year, and just on the day fall apart. Fremantle is very consistent. They have good defensive pressure, and just generally around the ground they have good pressure when they're on. There's a few question marks for me. One of them is Luke McFarlane. Can he stay healthy, or is he on his last legs? Is there going to be that swan song to go to the finals and try and make that grand final again? And the same with Pavlich. Obviously, they're getting on.
You would think it's the last roll of the dice for
you'd
those
think
two.
So, but I think we've been saying that about Dustin Fletcher for 10 years. So
maybe
a bit too early to rule them out just yet. But it's something you've got to look at. But I think Fremantle will be up there. I don't know about top 4. We'll get to that later. But
we'll do. Moving on to Geelong now, and this was probably the big pickup not really the big pickup, it was the kind of good pickup that they made. Mitch Clark.
Feel good story.
Yeah, feel good story. Yeah, Mitch Clark. He's obviously played for Brisbane first, went to Melbourne, left Melbourne for some off-field issues, but now he's back at Geelong, and he's looking pretty good in the NAB Cup. Rob, what do we think of Mitch?
Absolutely. He kicked 6 goals in one of the NAB Cup games. He looks great. If he's as good as advertised, he could be a real impact player for them. Obviously, they had Hawkins as the avenue to go. I think we talked last week. I think he got 68 off the top of my head last year.
Third. Yes,
came
with
third
68.
in the Coleman. If they can find another avenue to go for it. And I mean, Hawkins is going to take the number 1 defender every week. So Mitch Clark getting the second defender.
Look, yeah,
if he can be a target, if he can be the tippet to the Buddy Franklin, if you will, then Geelong could be in for a really good season.
Yeah, good. Is this the year, we talk about it most years now, is this the year that they fall from grace?
I don't think they'll completely fall from grace. I think when you have Tom Hawkins in your forward line, when you have Joel Selwood, perennial Brownlow medal candidate in your midfield, and there's footage last year of Selwood in losing games, and he does not like to lose.
Yeah.
I think when you have a driving force like that in your club and you have talent around it, I mean, Stevie J, he's getting on, but he's still one of the most mercurial and exciting talents in the game. When you've got this much talent on the team, as well as the pedigree, I don't think this year will be the year they fall off. But having said that, I don't think they're serious premiership contenders at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about how they weren't as good last year, but they finished third. So when you're finishing third, you're pretty good. Okay, I want to talk about just quickly Joel Selwood in the midfield. Where does his support come from? Obviously, there's players like Stokes, Motlop, Caddy, sort of around him. What needs to happen for Selwood not to be the only one playing?
Well, they all need to step up. It's as simple as that. At times last year, I was really, really impressed with Caddy. At times, not so much. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest thing that's going to help this midfield division is if the ruckman Hamish McIntosh, if he can stay healthy. In the finals last year when they played, or maybe it was in the last round of the regular season, but when they played Hawthorn last year, David Hale tore Hamish McIntosh to shreds. And I love Hamish McIntosh. He's probably one of my favourite ruckmen. But if he can stay healthy, he gives those midfielders like Selwood, Lucky Caddies, a chance to be first to the ball, and that'll go a long way to helping Geelong.
Definitely. Gold Coast now, they finished 12th in 2014. They were like second after 4 games last year. They were doing very well indeed on the ladder. Lost Ablett last year, dropped off a little bit, and finishing a little bit, dropped off quite a lot, 10 places. They finished 12th. Now, without Gary, can they win games? Can they be not a genuine contender, but can they be in the mix of other teams?
I think even without Gary this year, they'll be in the mix. Obviously, we hope he comes back and we hope his shoulder's right and he returns to his best form. But it really is a prime example of in Gary we trust. When he's there, they are just another level. And there's a lot of players that are, now their fifth season, fourth or fifth season. They've been around a while now.
Fifth, yeah.
So when you think about it, your Prestias, your Swallows, your Harley Benells, all those guys you would hope would take another leap forward. Prestia was a standout for me last year. He most unassuming looking bloke in the world. He looks like he's about 5'8" and built like a nugget, but he's a great player, and there's a lot of talent in this Gold Coast club. If they can take that next step, and I think a few of them did when Gary was out last year, a lot of these top echelon midfielders stepped up and held their ground, and that's the sign of great players. And if they can do that with Gary back in, they're a lock for the 8 this year in my mind.
Oh, good. That's my next question, Rob. You've summed up very nicely. So if they don't get into the finals with or without Gary, is it a disappointment for the club this year?
I think it has to be. Last year, if Gary remained healthy, they probably would have snuck into the 8. So this year, I think if they don't make the 8, then absolutely that's a disappointment. Having said that, I love Rocket Eade. Obviously, he coached the Bulldogs to 3 consecutive prelims. Didn't quite get over the hump. But I think he's a great coach, and he'll be great for those young players, giving them the confidence that they need to take the game on and eventually lock in the Gold Coast for the 8 this year.
Definitely. Moving on to GWS, the other expansion club, who finished 16th last year. For me, I think GWS were more the surprise club. Like, everyone's sort of going on about how better the Gold Coast were last year, but for me it was GWS because they were just getting absolutely whipped. I think more worse than Gold Coast were when they first started. And also, GWS didn't have a player like Gary Ablett to kind of the main spotlighted player. So it was a big plus for me. Jeremy Cameron went down until only played half the season. So he was their big goal kicker, and he went down, and they still were able to win a few games. Now, so if Jeremy Cameron is back, is he an unlikely winner of the Coleman?
Absolutely. I mean, I know they've got a lot of key position players. I talked about Cam McCarthy last week, and obviously they've got Jonathan Giles as well. There's a lot of forwards there, a lot of people that can kick goals, but Jeremy Cameron is the one that stands out above all the rest. Even in his first season, experienced backlines didn't know how to deal with this kid. So if he can get constant delivery, and you'd think with another pre-season and a bit more development, the midfield would start getting more drive into the forward line, especially with the addition of Ryan Griffin there. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he'll win it. I don't think that GWS will kick enough winning scores for him to be able to win it. Having said that, though, I think he'll be recognised once again as one of the best forwards in the league. Yeah,
good. They obviously lost Tom Boyd, who went to the Bulldogs, and John Padden will miss a season with a knee injury. Is there too much pressure on Jeremy now with those kind of two players?
I don't think so. I think GWS, will... Obviously, they have high expectations internally and what they want to achieve, but I think from the public perception, you have to realise that Cameron's coming back from injury. There's going to be an adjustment period. There's a lot of other players in this team that all need to rise at the same time as Jeremy Cameron if this team's going to be successful. There's no point having, the Coleman medalist kick 80 goals if you win 3 games. So I think it's about building a team and building that trust and building them up as one. before you start moving forward.
Definitely. Hawthorn now, who are the reigning premiers. They picked up James Frawley. Good pickup, Rob, first of all.
Yes. I think anytime you can pick up someone with that type of talent is good. I'm surprised. I don't know how Hawthorn do it. They seem to have the most accomplished list, and you'd think that everyone on that list would be getting paid rather handsomely, and they seem to just have money to splurge on these free agents. But I mean, good on them. Absolutely, he's a good pickup for them, especially with Lake aging. You'd think that Frawley would start taking on some of those matchups as well.
Definitely. I know you love this boy, so I'm going to throw this question next to you. Will Langford, how's his year going to go? Is he the next big thing? Is he the next Dyson Heppell?
He's bigger than Dyson
Bigger
Heppell.
than Dyson, oi!
He is going to be the poster child for the AFL this year. I have big hopes for Will Langford. I mentioned last year a couple of times on the show, he just reminds me of Dermot Brereton, and I don't know whether that's a positive or a negative thing, but someone that commands that type of attention on the field, and his grand final last year was nothing short of just brilliant.
Incredible.
How he didn't get in conversation for Norm Smith for me was unfortunate, but obviously there's a lot of players on the day that played really well for Hawthorn. But absolutely, Will Langford's the next big thing. I will put my money on it. If we had an All-Star game, he would be an All-Star this year.
All-Star. He's in Rob's All-Star game.
He will be. I don't know if he'll make the final All-Australian team, but the Australian team. The All-Australian, is it the 40-man squad? He's a lock for the 40-man squad for me. Absolutely. I would put him in there now, providing you stay healthy.
Heard it here first.
He would be in the All-Australian 40.
Cyril now. Cyril obviously had an injury-interrupted year last year. Came back controversially for the finals. Kind of controversially. I'm saying it was controversial. Will he stay healthy? Is he playing this year?
I think he has a history of getting injured at some point. So I think, history suggests that he'll probably miss a couple of weeks here and there. But Hawthorn proved last year that they know what they're doing and they can nurse their players through. Obviously, like you said, slightly controversial circumstances, him coming back into the grand final. But I think they made the right decision. The pressure that he put on that first quarter last year was amazing and really set the tone. So I think he'll probably get injured, but that doesn't make him any less mercurial than he always is. So.
The Melbourne Demons up next, who finished 17th in 2014. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the attacking flair that Simon Goodwin brings to the club. Is he going to still... Is that with him and Paul Roos kind of in there? Are they any chance of anything? Leaving it open to you, Rob.
Any chance of anything, hey?
Well, what is a milestone for the club? Like, what are they kind of working towards now?
What would they consider a pass grade? Is that?
Yeah.
I think 5 wins. How many wins did they get last year?
Well, they finished 17th. Yeah, about 4, 5.
4, 5. Okay, let's say 6 or 7 wins. I think would
just
be
kind of bettering their last year.
Would be
really.
A pass grade. I don't think the wins though is as important as being competitive. Every week there was a lot of games where they just got absolutely blown out of the water last year.
They lost 10 games. They lost their last 10 games straight of 2014, which is not a stat that you
not something you want to put in the trophy cabinet, is it? Yeah.
Jesse Hogan, big one, inside 50, along with Jeff Garlett, who they grabbed from Carlton. So interesting to see there. How long does Paul Roos coach before we see results? He's obviously a great coach, premiership coach. Can he come in and turn a club around? Or
I think he can provide a solid foundation for the next coach. I don't think he would want to stay around for this. There's a lot of pressure on him, obviously, with his pedigree to come in. And this club was, let's face it, in shambles for a couple of years before he got there. Beyond turning procedures around and turning personnel around, it's just a confidence. Like if I was a young player and I got drafted to Melbourne, there's not a lot of
it's a hard one, isn't it?
It's almost bittersweet in a sense. Like you've made the AFL and then you're going to Melbourne.
Yeah.
He can provide a really solid foundation though, and it's about getting those players to believe in themselves and believe that they can actually win. And the more he's there and the more he sets that foundation and puts those procedures in place, the more that the kids that get drafted come in, they will arrive with that belief, and that'll ultimately help the club. So
can they avoid a bottom 2 finish? Will they be? No, they cannot.
Mate, bottom 4, I think they're almost guaranteed. Bottom 2, maybe not. It depends on how bad a couple of the other clubs are, and we'll get to them.
Yeah, last question for Melbourne. Can Jack Watts finally become the player that they drafted him to be?
Jack Watts.
He's a tough
Jack
one.
Watts. He's one of the most maligned players, I think. Obviously, he was taken ahead of Nick Naitanui, and regardless of what you think of Nick Naitanui, I think he's had more of an impact on the game than Jack Watts has.
I'll say that. I'll agree with that one.
Absolutely. I hope so. I mean, you look at his frame, you look at what he is and who he is, and he just looks like the player that Melbourne need in that forward line. Especially Chris Dawes will be missing the first couple of rounds through suspension from incidents from the end of last season, but
not the best way to start the season.
It's not good, but having said that, that might be the break that he needs. I know we say this to every player, but another pre-season under his belt, I don't think it makes a huge difference 5 years into your career now, but maybe Paul Roos has instilled something in him, and I hope he can become what Melbourne needs. As a Bulldog supporter, I've seen clubs struggle for a very, very long time, and it's not good for the game. It's not good for the supporters. So hopefully Melbourne can take a leap forward. In that respect. They
picked up Hergy Labumba as well now at the Demons, and like players like Hergy Labumba, players like Bernie Vince, who used to play for the Crows, used to be one of my favourite players as well. Bernie Vince
used to be one of mine as well.
If players like that can stand up, really they have to do something. They have to at least win a few games. Moving over to North Melbourne now, who finished 6th in 2014. They got Jared Waite, who was from Carlton. That was a pretty good pickup, you would think, from North Melbourne. They're always that kind of team as well that's hanging around the top four, in and out of the top four. Haven't made a grand final, obviously, in a while, and haven't really made an impact in the finals. 2 years ago, straight sets. They went out. They lost. Got flogged by West Coast, and last year out of the finals as well. So
in rather spectacular fashion against Sydney. It's worth noting. North is one of the teams. I think during the year they were the only team in the top four to have beaten the other three teams in the top four, and then they go and get absolutely thrashed by Sydney. After an amazing fight back against Essendon the week before. So. It's interesting. Like, they're one of those teams. Does Jared Waite make them better? It gives them another avenue to go. I mean, Drew Petrie was getting hammered, and if it wasn't for 15 minutes of magic by Ben Brown in last year's finals, they probably wouldn't have even made.
I'm about to get to Ben Brown.
Yeah, Ben Brown is. I think he's my cult hero this year. I think he's just the type of person that I want to root for, even if I don't like North Melbourne, or if I don't want them to win the game or anything. I think it's hard to bet against someone that looks like Ben Brown. He's a galloping gazelle. He's not the most graceful thing, but he gets the results. So I hope Ben Brown has a good year.
Can they make the grand final? Simply.
No.
We
did this last week. We predicted it was a Hawthorn-Port Adelaide showdown. Both of us predicted that. To make the grand final, they have to be better than one of those teams on the day.
This is true.
And I don't think that's going to happen.
No. Okay, on Ben Brown, can he be more consistent this year? Obviously, he had those explosions of just games that he just played amazingly, but then he was kind of quiet for a lot of it. Can he kind of have a good season this year?
I hope so. It's a Jack Watts scenario. I mean, big key position players take longer to develop. Ben Brown is certainly one of those players. So if he can become anything towards consistent, if he can average a goal or two a game and just be another option into the 50, when teams get pigeonholed going inside the 50 to one player, and it's happened to Collingwood in the last couple of seasons with Travis Cloke, they're very easy to defend against, and the rebound footy really hurts you when you end up losing games. So if Ben Brown can even become an option, if he can snare a goal or two a game, just bring the ball to ground, let those crumbers do their work, absolutely, I think he'll have a great year.
Port Adelaide now, who finished 5th in 2014, but they only missed the grand final by a few points.
Now, I'm going to take over and I'm going to ask you the question now, because
you
have a crush and I want everyone to know. I just want you to talk and I want you to gush all over Port Adelaide. So the big question is, can they win it all, Sean?
They can. They can.
Listeners, you cannot see the smile that has erupted over this Crows supporter's face.
No, I'm excited. I'm a massive Crows supporter, but I absolutely love South Australian football, and any win in South Australia is a win in my books. And I think to see where they were at a few years ago, and to see how good they are, and to see how many people are tipping them for a win for the grand final, it's incredible.
Myself included. But listeners, just to give you a bit of perspective on this, Sean's heart bleeds blue, gold, and red. He bleeds Crows. Every time I talk to him, he's like, "Oh, did you see the Crows on the weekend?" I'm like, "Mate, they got thrashed." He sent me something during the week. It was from the Fox Footy Facebook page. And it was a headline saying, Mark Rasciuto loves the Crows, but he can't help but be impressed by Port Adelaide, or something to those lines. Sean sent me that photo and said, this is me.
This is me.
and that is exactly, you love the Crows a bit, but you are in love with Port Adelaide, and rightfully so. They're playing a very attractive brand of football.
Yeah, amazing midfield. Robbie Gray, Ollie Wines, Chad Wingard. There's so many players. Every player brings something to the team. It's just an incredible spread of players. Jay Schultz will be the one for me if he can sort of come up. He's always really up and down. Starts the season pretty well. Doesn't usually finish it that well. Actually, he finishes okay. In the middle, he has his big gap.
I think that was last year at least. That was the problem with Port Adelaide. They had that 4 to 6 week period where they were just down. And if they're going to finish, 1 or 2, they really need to get rid of that. And that's the question. Can they keep that performance? They have the first 8 rounds, they're just unstoppable. And then they have this mid-season break. I don't know if the buys get to them or maybe it throws them out of their rhythm, but there's a 6 week period in the middle where they go down, and then by the end of the season we're like, oh yeah, they're legitimate. What were we worried about? So hopefully they can keep that that slump from happening this year. Yeah, definitely.
The word out of the Port Adelaide camp, whether it's true or not, I don't know. The word out of the camp was that for that about 6 week period, they were training super hard for the finals. So they were training for the finals. They knew they were going to make the finals already because they'd kind of already set that by the first half of the season. Train really hard for the next 6 weeks, and then by the finals they're ready and they can kind of do it, which you could see. But I think they need to still sort of have that approach, but just need to reduce their losses a little bit so that rather than finishing 5th on the ladder and kind of getting a worse run, they could finish, top 2, 3, 4 and get a better run at the finals.
Yeah, have that week break and be able to plan for your opponent a bit more.
Yeah, without a doubt. So if they can do that same approach, definitely, but just kind of minimise the winning, then they'll be fun. Obviously, you got Paddy Ryder now in there. I've totally forgot about Paddy.
In my dream team, Sean. How could you forget?
It's too expensive for me, Rob. We don't all have 33,000 just floating around casually.
Have you finished your dream team, by the way?
Yeah, I have.
How much cap room do you have left?
Minus under it. 1,000. It's in the last.
You've got 1,000.
It's about that. It's not 33.
So, okay, well, we might get to that later if we have more time. But let's move on to the Tigers because they didn't have a great finals campaign last year. Obviously, going out to Port Adelaide in the first round.
Yeah, finished 8th. But before they got to the finals, they won 10 games in a row after losing about 10 games in a row. So really up and down season for the Tigers. They need to just take another step up in class, really. They've got the talent there. We know that they can win games. They can go on really good runs. They just need to kind of get some continuity together. Players like Brandon Ellis, he did it last season. They need to kind of take a chapter out of his book and go up. Players that need to step up: Ty Vickery, Reece Conker, Nick Vlastian. Vlaston. Apologies,
yep.
Nick. And Ben Lennon. Those kind of players are the ones that need to kind of step it up to the next thing. And then I think that they could go top 8, Rob.
When I was doing my ladder, this is one of the teams that tore me because, like you said, the first half of the season last year, they were atrocious. I don't know what was going on with the club. And then the second half, they looked like they could maybe give Port Adelaide a run in the elimination final.
Yeah.
They didn't. They got smashed. And never again will I ever support the Tigers.
It was a short one.
It was a short one. But I don't think they'll make the finals this year. And the reason is because, as I was thinking about it, their best is good, but their worst is worse. And when they are bad, they are bad. And I think until they can get that consistency, and maybe over the course of the year, they will show that consistency and they'll change my mind. But it will take something pretty special for me to pop them in my 8 this year.
Definitely. Chris Newman, is he playing this year? There's obviously he's had 14 seasons with the club. He's 32 years old. And they've just discovered in a physical test that he's got a irregular heartbeat. So we don't really know what's kind of happening with him. If he's fit to play, obviously he will play, but he might just be ruled out by doctors saying that it's too unsafe.
It's interesting, and I'm not a doctor. I'm far from it. So, what I'm about to say doesn't necessarily hold weight in the medical world, but my father has an irregular heartbeat, and far from an elite athlete. Let me make that perfectly clear. And obviously a good 15 years older at the point when it was discovered. But it depends on how they want to go about it. There's medication, obviously, that they can do for it and things. But for the most part, the tablets that my father was given was to stop the heart from exerting itself. if that's the way that they go down, it doesn't look good for Chris Newman. But having said that, he hadn't played in a final till a couple of years ago. At least he got his finals.
Yeah.
One of the great guys of the AFL as well. So
great guy.
we all hope he plays, and in the meantime, obviously, our best wishes go out to him as well.
Definitely. Moving on to St Kilda. The Saints, where did they finish? They finished 18th last year. How can I forget that? They got the spoon last year. Yeah. Not a great year for St Kilda. They got beaten by Gold Coast in their bad slump without Gary Ablett, the only team that Gold Coast has beat without Gary. Not a good stat you want for your club. So what happens now? Players like Ahmed Saad is back. He was obviously had a 2-year break for some off-field stuff. Sam Fisher, Jared Geary, they're back as well. Nick Riewoldt obviously the big player in the team. Is there anyone that can kind of assist Nick?
Like I brought this up last week. There's a kid called Tom Lee on their roster. He's he's Riewoldt, just 10 years younger. I think they need to get as much game time into him as they can this season. Nick, obviously, maybe not his last season, but he's definitely on the way out, as much as it pains me to say, because he's been great for the game for so long. But they need to see what they have in Tom Lee, because if they have something, then who better to mentor them than the man that, pretty much took them to a grand final and nearly won. I mean, obviously, they had a fantastic midfield that year as well. But key position forwards are a bit harder to find than elite midfielders. So I think they need to get on to Tom Lee. That's my pick. I know it's a very sort of precise thing, but that's what I'd be doing. Get as much game time into him. See what you've got. It was kind of like what Essendon did with I think there was a forward when Matthew Lloyd and Scott Lucas retired, and they went for an entire season with him, decided not to go down that path. But I think you have to see what you've got. You have to give him time to feel comfortable at AFL level, because if Nick Riewoldt can mentor him to become half of what Nick Riewoldt was, I think you've got a key forward for the future.
Definitely. Wooden spoon, the only way is up, you would think. Is this true?
You can only... the only way is up, but you can also stagnate as well.
They may chuck in an expansion club and they go 19th next year. Can they better 18?
I think they can. I think... And we'll go through this later, but I think there's a couple of teams that are vying for that unfortunate privilege of the wooden spoon. So I think St Kilda, very rarely do teams earn it to back-to-back years. So I think St Kilda will probably avoid that fate this year.
Going to do some. Sydney Swans finished second in the 2014 season. Can this be the year? Is there room in our grand final of Hawks and Port Adelaide for a Swan team?
This is one of the things. I mean, anyone in the top four theoretically can make it, but it seems like every year it's 1 and 2, and those teams that finish first and second are just in another league to the 3 and 4. The exception last year was Port Adelaide, who just came rushing home and nearly took out Hawthorn, but that was because Hawthorn slept on them in the last 10 minutes and it nearly cost them. There isn't any room. There's so many things about the Swans that we can talk about. We can praise them all day. We can talk about the players. We can talk about the pedigree, but I don't see either of them coming out on top of a Hawthorn Port Adelaide in a prelim.
No. Buddy and Tippett, can they get consistent sort of games? It's usually if one's in, the other one's out, and vice versa.
If they can put in a consistent campaign, it'll go a long way to helping Sydney sort of get to where they want to go. But as good as Sydney are, and like I said, we could harp on about them all day.
There's so much to like, but
there's so much to like, but then you're like, okay, I've got 2 words for you, Hawthorn and power, and you're like, well, I can't really argue with either of those ones. So
definitely,
no, there's not room for Sydney in the grand final, but they'll still have a great year. They'll probably crack 18 wins again, and they'll just be Sydney like they always are.
Okay, moving over west now. The West Coast Eagles finished 9th in 2014. Lost Cox was obviously the big blow. Now it kind of relies on your boy Nick Nat to take us through. What's going to happen? How's it going to work? How's Nick Nat going to go?
Nick Nat is going to average 37 hitouts, a goal, and 1 exciting highlight play a game. That's my prediction.
Is your prediction?
That's my prediction. I don't know. Nick Nat's, again, one of the most mercurial things. There's a lot of talk in the media in the last few years that he's a great athlete, not a great football player. And part of me agrees with that. You look at what he's able to do in some instances, and it's amazing, but it's because of his speed and it's because of his agility at that size, not necessarily because he's a very skilled player like a Mark Lacroix, who can dribble a goal from the boundary line, or an Eddie Betts, those small crumbing forwards that we think about. So, I mean, I think he'll have a better year this year. Like I said, in the games that Cox was out last year, he really did shine. So hopefully he does for his sake as well. And for the good of the game, like he's a great player. When he's on, he's very exciting to watch. So I hope Nick Nat can have a big year.
Definitely. There's been a lot of talk about their midfield up and down last year. Hopefully we can get some kind of continuity with them, because it's such a talented midfield, such a talented team, but they just haven't had that kind of consistency throughout.
And I brought it up last week as well. For me, they're the most disappointing team in the league because they have so much potential, so much talent. Like I said, last year they had Nick Nat and Dean Cox. They have Josh Kennedy, Jack Garling, Mark LaCroix up front. They have a Brownlow medalist in their midfield. They should be an excellent team. And for some reason, I don't know whether it's... I think part of it's skill execution. They can't seem to hit their targets as much as they'd like. I think they over handball at times as well. Some of them can get quite flustered as well. But when they're on, if they could put their best together for an entire season, they'd be top 4. But I can't see it happening, and I don't even think they'll make the 8 this year.
Don't think they'll make the 8. They can't crack that. They finished one game out, and if Richmond had lost last year, they would have been playing finals, but not happening this year. But
at the same time, the Eagles shouldn't have been in that dilemma because they shouldn't have lost to Essendon. And this goes back to the consistency. If they had had, they were up 6 or 7 goals in that game and they lost. And if they had had the consistency, they wouldn't have even been in a position where they were waiting on Richmond to lose a game to make the 8.
Okay, final team for the list is the Western Bulldogs, who finished, where'd they finish? 14th.
It wasn't a great year.
14th last year. Rob, you've got 4 minutes. Go.
4 minutes to talk about the Bulldogs. All right, I'll ask you some questions because otherwise it's just going to be me talking, and I love the sound of my own voice, but that's not right. Can we recover from the loss of Tom Liberatore, obviously shattering his left ACL? Number 1 in the AFL for clearances, number 1 in the AFL for tackles, won the Bulldogs best and fairest last year. How hard is he to replace?
Oh, very hard. As you said, we will get to the ladders soon, but I haven't done Western Bulldogs too high. I mean, they obviously had a pretty disastrous, other than Tom Boyd, pretty disastrous trade season.
It wasn't the best, but I think I looked at the stats and we lost over 800 games of experience in the last trade period between Griffin,
That's
Cooney,
incredible. 800 games of experience.
So
wow.
Gene Siracusa had close to 300 on his own. Griffin had 200. Cooney had 200. Tom Williams retired. There's a few other players that got delisted or traded away. Sean Higgins, Jason Tutt as well. That's a lot of games. There are players and coaches that coach for many, many years and don't even get to that number. So we lost a lot of experience. Having said that, experience makes way for youthful enthusiasm. Definitely. And I think there's a lot of players in that team that could use that space. And even in the preseason against Collingwood, when we were on. And I think these young players that can actually run around and they'll give their all are going to be a really big positive for us this season.
Yeah, definitely. I think the positive thing that, I mean, a lot of Bulldog supporters just sort of look at, the big names going, look at the games that they've kind of attributed that have lost the experience. But we look at, you think about the people that are leaving, they're people who don't want to be at the club anymore. And really, if you're kind of cleaning out the old, it's a good sign. It's a step forward because then you're going to get people who want to be at the Bulldogs, who want to play. Same thing happened with Port Adelaide 4 years ago. I know we always talk about them, but the exact same thing happened.
That's right, the Bulldogs are 4 years away from their maiden grand final.
But all these players left, and from a horrible team, Port Adelaide 4 years ago, and all these good players are leaving, everyone's like, well, what are we going to do now? But they got all these young players who are now, the superstars of the competition. So it'll be interesting to see, but... good luck to your boys.
Good luck. The next question I have is Tom Boyd obviously was the huge one that came over.
Yes.
Many millions of dollars over many years for a man that's played less than 10 AFL games. What is the pass grade for Tom Boyd in your mind as an objective third party to the Western Bulldogs? How many goals does he need to kick, or how many games does he need to play for this season to be a success for him and in the development of the club?
For games, I reckon minimum, like absolute minimum, 75% of the season he'd be needing to play. And probably looking at 30 to 40 goals for the year. He needs to do something. If they've made the biggest sort of campaign for him and they've lost some of the biggest names at that club, they lost the captain at the club for this boy. He needs to do something.
I think if 75% of the games, I think that roughly equates to 17 or 18 games. I think that's fair. I don't think he needs to kick 40 goals. I think if he can kick 25 to 30, if he can get a goal or two a game, I think that's a win because he's going to attract the number one defender as a 19, 20-year-old kid.
Yeah. As long as he's doing something per game, I think.
I think if he's just contesting the ball, making way for players like Jared Grant, Stuart Cramery, things like that, they get lesser defenders on them. I think that's a win. So I think the results that we'll see from Tom Boyd's impact this season, especially, will be on how many goals the rest of the team kicks. Right, well, our predictions thing doesn't quite seem to be working. Technology,
that was
Sean.
the predictions.
Technology
there, in
does not seem to be working, so that's not good.
Let's do them. Predictions. So let's just go through the ladders first of all, and we'll start. Should we start from the bottom or should we start with the top? What do you want to do?
Hang on, let me get my paperwork in check. We'll start from the bottom, Sean.
Start from the bottom?
Start from the bottom.
Okay, my bottom two. Let's do our bottom two teams first. My wooden spoon has gone to St Kilda this year, as it did last year. And second, almost wooden spoon, has gone to Carlton. Now, I know I looked at yours before the show and I see you've got something similar to mine. Rob, what have you got?
18th place, I've got St Kilda finishing. I don't think they're going to have a great season.
No.
Carlton, again, 17th. Now, Mick Malthouse disagrees with this. Mick Malthouse thinks they're undefeated this year, Sean.
Mickey, coming out with that gear.
What? Coming out with that gear?
I mean, like, I really... Brendan Sanderson did that a few years ago. After the Crows got second in Brendan Sanderson's first year, Sanderson came out that pre-season and said, this is the Crows' time. We're going to fly, and looking at a flag. And they finished 15th, 14th, something like that. I really don't like it when coaches do that because it puts so much pressure on the club. It puts unneeded pressure. Why do that? Anyway, I'll leave that alone. 16th to 12th. Robbie's going to hate my 16th spot.
Go.
I've put your boys, Bulldogs, in 16th
That's
place.
That's fine. Mine's written in pencil, so I can change the Crows if I need to.
I've got Demons in 15th. I reckon they'll have a better year. Giants, I reckon, are going to step up again to 14th. And finally, the Bombers, I think, are going to be the big four in 13th place. Rob?
My 16 is Melbourne. I've got them avoiding the bottom two places. I think they'll develop a little bit this year. Collingwood, I have a big fall from grace. They'll be 15th. Brisbane, despite all of their improvement, will be 14th. The Bulldogs I'll have as 13th.
13th, okay. Only 3 difference between me and you with the Bulldogs.
And the Greater Western Sydney Giants I'll pick at 12 this year.
At 12, okay. My 12 is Magpies. Yeah, they had the burst season last year in tennies, obviously, I've said. But I reckon it's going to get a little bit worse than before it gets better. 11th to 8th. 11th place, I've got the Suns, Gold Coast. I reckon they're going to improve a little bit. Not too much. They will improve a little bit.
So you have them missing the finals this year, even with Gary, after they nearly made it last year.
When I logged on Dream 10 this morning and saw a big Band-Aid on my captain, then I did the ladder after that. That's why they're 11th.
It wasn't a completely objective view, was it, Sean?
Tigers, I reckon, will lock 10th spot. Eagles in 9th. I think they're going to do a bit better. And I've got the mighty South Australian second team, the Adelaide Crows, in 8th spot. So they'll just be making finals. Rob?
Cool. So I have Richmond in 11, West Coast in 10, Essendon in 9, and I've got the Crows scraping into the 8th place, Sean. So we're going to go 7-6-5, and then we'll move on to the top 4.
Good.
So
Lions
7-6-5?
is in 7th. I reckon they're going to be the big lifter. Cats in 6th. They'll fall a little bit from grace. And Fremantle, I reckon they'll have the same spot as last year in 5th.
I have Gold Coast finishing 7th, Geelong finishing 6th, and Freo just missing the top 4. Top 4, Sean?
Top 4.
Who have you got? So
fourth place, North. 3rd place, Swannies. 2nd place, Hawks. And the 1st place, the mighty Power.
I'm very similar. I have North finishing 4th, Sydney finishing 3rd. I have Port Adelaide finishing 2nd and Hawthorn finishing 1st. But nearly identical, Sean.
Nearly identical? Yeah, we did pretty well.
Nearly identical. Now, we have run a little bit over time, so we're not going to have time to predict this week's games. What we will do instead... is just cut straight to the final sting, assuming the technology wants to work, Sean. So
it's a gamble.
In 7 seconds, I'm going to play this, and I really hope it works. You ready?
Yeah, do it.
And it doesn't seem to want to work.
Rightio.
Well, we're going to finish the show anyway. So,
yeah, let's finish it.
All right, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, or send us an email if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the show, or even if you don't, even if you want to say hello. We would love that as well. Sean, anything to say to the punters?
Enjoy round 1. How exciting. It's here, finally.
Sean's going on holiday for round one, so I'm very upset with him. But on behalf of myself, Robert Beaver, and my co-host Sean Subra, thanks for giving us a listen. Don't forget to go out, watch the footy this weekend. We will be back to break it all down next week, but in the meantime, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, or send us an email, 6pointspodcast@gmail.com, spelled SIX, and enjoy the footy. It's back!
Murdoch University is the provider of resources and transmission facilities for the 6 Points podcast. The views expressed on the show are those of the individual and not necessarily those of Murdoch University or Radio.